अभयं सत्त्वसंशुद्धिः
अभयं सत्त्वसंशुद्धिः
ज्ञानयोगव्यवस्थितिः
ज्ञानयोगव्यवस्थितिः
दानं दमश्च यज्ञश्च
दानं दमश्च यज्ञश्च
स्वाध्यायस्तप आर्जवम्
स्वाध्यायस्तपमार्जवम्
अहिंसा सत्यमक्रोधः
अहिंसा सत्यमक्रोधः
त्यागः शान्तिरपैशुनम्
त्यागः शान्तिरपैशुनम्
दया भूतेष्वलोलुप्त्वम्
दया भूतेष्वलोलुप्त्वम्
मार्दवम् क्रीरचापलम्
माधवं वीरचापलम्
तेजक्षमा धृतिः शौचम्
तेजक्षमा धृतिः शौचम्
अद्रोहो नातिमानिता
अद्रोहो नातिमानिता
भवन्ति सम्पदं दैवीम्
भवन्ति सम्पदं दैवीम्
अभिजातस्य भारत.
अभिजातस्य भारत.
Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, fearlessness, purification of one's existence, cultivation of spiritual knowledge, charity, self-control, performance of sacrifice, study of the Vedas, austerity, simplicity, non-violence, truthfulness, freedom from anger, renunciation, tranquility, aversion to fault-finding, compassion for all living entities, freedom from covetousness, gentleness, modesty, steady determination, vigor, forgiveness, fortitude, cleanliness, and freedom from envy and from the passion for honor. These transcendental qualities, O son of Bharata, belong to godly men endowed with divine nature.
Okay, thank you. So we have read of these 26 qualities. I know when I did the class, we did fearlessness and purification of one's existence and cultivation of spiritual knowledge, isn't it? Last class, what did you do? Charity?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now, fearlessness, purification of one's existence, and cultivation of spiritual knowledge. These are for sannyasis. And these are primarily for sannyasis. Not that others should not do them, but for sannyasi it's the prime duty. Charity, self-control, perform sacrifice. This is for the grihasthas. Study the Vedas. Did you do last time?
Yes, sir.
We did. Brahmachari, yeah, that's right. That's brahmachari. And austerity also, simplicity, these are all the qualities for brahmacharis. Austerity also did we do? Of course, the purport is not exactly mapped onto the translation. The purport does jump around a little bit. So it's not exactly. But we'll go to the point where I just want to make the point today that first set of qualities is for sannyasis and the others are for grihasthas and then for brahmacharis. Primarily, austerity is for everyone, no doubt, but the brahmacharya is specifically aimed at simplicity and austerity. These are the grihastha life is hard to be simple. We try, unless you are very brahminical, we have a tendency to accumulate and get attached and have a lot of things and make our life sometimes very complicated, especially living in the cities. It is complex. But austerity, study of Vedas and austerity and simplicity are primarily for brahmacharis. So let's move on to the purport where we stopped. Ahimsa, is it? Non-violence, okay. That means we covered the truthfulness, austerity and simplicity we covered. Non-violence, okay. Ahimsa, all right. Maybe Bhaskar Prabhu can read.
Prabhu, last time we did tapas as well.
This is after that.
Yes.
Ahimsa is after that.
In that order. After that, yeah. So you're right. So we start from Ahimsa then. So in your book, what page it is?
620.
Okay. You got it? You can start reading.
Ahimsa means not arresting the progressive life of any living entity. One should not think that since the spirit spark is never killed, even after killing the body, there is no harm in killing animals for sense gratification. People are now addicted to eating animals in spite of having an ample supply of grains, fruits, and milk. There is no necessity for animal killing. This injunction is for everyone. When there is no alternative, one may kill an animal, but it should be offered in sacrifice. At any rate, when there is an ample food supply for humanity, persons who are desiring to make advancement in spiritual realization should not commit violence to animals. Real ahimsa means not checking anyone's progressive life. The animals are making progress in their evolutionary life by transmigrating from one category of animal life to another. If a particular animal is killed, then his progress is checked. If an animal is staying in a particular body for so many days or so many years and is untimely killed, then he has to come back again in that form of life to complete the remaining days in order to be promoted to another species of life. So, their progress should not be checked simply to satisfy one's palate. This is called ahimsa.
So what are your realizations on this purport?
First and foremost is one should not kill an animal.
Yeah.
Because we have ample supply of grains and other things to eat.
Yeah.
By killing an animal, we are reducing the opportunity of living its normal life. By killing it, it comes back again to complete its evolutionary life.
Yeah.
So their progress should not be checked simply to satisfy one's need of eating that animal.
Yeah. Very good. Okay. Any other points?
Eightfold yoga system, the first limb of that is yama.
Correct.
And within that, ahimsa is the first one, which is
Yeah.
like if we are going to be a bhakti yogi, that the bhakti will come only, like we follow the
Ahimsa.
yoga system of ahimsa. So within that, near yama, the ahimsa is the first limb of, or the first sub-limb of yama.
Yeah, very good. Yes, Madhuri?
Prabhu, it's not.
Hare Krishna. So it's not mentioned here, but in chapter 13 we also read ahimsa. It says ahimsa means not arresting the progressive life of any living entity, and Srila Prabhupada in the purport also describes that it means not checking Krishna consciousness of other living entities as well. So he says ahimsa has many aspects,
Yes.
of which this is most important.
Correct. Very good. Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, ahimsa, probably we can also various levels of non-violence.
Yes.
One is non-violence at the physical level. The other is non-violence at the mental level.
Yes, that's right.
So, adhyatmic, if we are doing any violence against someone at the mental level, and then the third one is non-violence. Again, what Prabhupada is saying over here, stopping the Krishna consciousness and stopping the individual to progress in that, or the soul from one body to the other.
Correct.
So there's one more point just in my mind. Come back.
So how does
Various levels.
so how does killing animals check their Krishna consciousness?
So Prabhu, again, the evolution is evolution in the sense the soul moves from one species to the next amongst the 8.4 million. So if the soul is not allowed to spend the relevant amount of time that it has to in that particular species, then it has to come back, as Prabhupada is saying,
Correct.
into that particular species again. So we are hindering that progress.
Very good. Yeah. because they have got an evolution scale. Therefore, there is yeah.
And it's come back to me. There was there's a shloka which I'm forgetting, where it clearly says that we have no rights to be parents, or where if we do not give the opportunity for our kids, for progeny to
Very good.
move in.
Yes.
No right to be parents,
Fathers, yes.
Yes. That's true. Yeah. So not giving Krishna consciousness is another form of violence, especially to children. We don't give them, then we are committing violence to the children. As parents, as king, as sub. Yeah, very good. Any other points?
I'm trying to think the shloka which says the killer of the soul as well.
Atmahan.
Atmahan.
Yes.
So
Isha Upanishad.
can
Yes.
we link this to that as well?
Very good. Yes, that's the Isha Upanishad. Very nice. The same point is being mentioned here. Violence means not giving Krishna consciousness to others. See, Prabhupada takes everything to the highest level. It doesn't stop at the superficial meaning of violence and non-violence, ahimsa. Because what happens when you practice superficially, even there are many Buddhists who eat meat. Dalai Lama eats meat, for example. I mean, where's the question of religiously following it? If you take it at a religious level, at superficial level, Dalai Lama himself doesn't feel the need to be vegetarian. So you can imagine how dangerous it is to stay at a superficial level. You don't understand or appreciate the deeper meaning of non-violence. So Bhavananda Prabhu was traveling with him once. I told you that, no? Did I tell in some class? I think I mentioned that. Yeah. He asked him, how come you eating meat? And he said, I eat whatever comes in front of me. I'm very practical. That's not the answer for a leader. No wonder they have so much problems in Tibet and persecution, because they're not following even ahimsa. Buddha came to teach ahimsa primarily. And Buddhists are equally eating meat. Sometimes they say, oh, if you don't kill the animal, it's all right. Somebody else kills, you can eat. All kinds of compromises are being done. So that's why Prabhupada takes the violence, non-violence to the ultimate level. Now look at the situation in India in terms of practical, all the more reason, okay, forget Dalai Lama, that's one example, but look at India now. The BJP government is trying to promote the protection of cows, which is really nice, Goraksha. The idea is good, but because of that they're losing votes very badly. So what are they doing that is not correct? Why is that not working out?
Last time you mentioned, Prabhu, that they are not taking advice from the brahmanas, like from the ISKCON sannyasis or something.
So if you are the advisor, what advice would you give him? I am Brahman, Prabhu. Look at my thread. I got a proof. What advice will you give them? That you see, we are thinking, who cares for our advice? But we discuss now. Bund bund se sagar band. It becomes a big ocean one day. People will start thinking, because you go and tell two other people, and they'll tell two other people, and before you know it, the word goes around. So we should think and be very confident. One day the people will consult the Krishna conscious movement. In Bhakti Tirtha Swami, people were consulting him. In African leaders, many leaders would go to Bhakti Tirtha Swami and ask him for advice. So a day will come and they will, but we have to be prepared for it. When they come and ask us, we shouldn't look blank. So what advice would you give?
Probably should ask them that stop killing of every animal, even though it may not be practical. So it will not just remain religious. It will be brought onto the human level rather than just on the...
Yeah. So it's become a political thing now. It's no longer, cow is not the picture anymore. It's the politics has come around it now. The protection of the cow is not important. It's a political statement. Rather, they should approach it more from, to get wider acceptance, they will have to approach it from the economic angle, health angle. They can show how killing the cow is harming the environment. Such a big environment now. India is being accused of environmental pollution as one of the top 5 most polluting countries. And they say another 10-15 years there will be it'll be 10 times more or something. Ridiculous figures are being given us how Indian pollution is going to increase by so many more times. And all the blame is put on the motor car, which is also true. But what is not being told is the abattoirs and the animal slaughter. That's taking away so much water, so much resources. If that way it's presented, not as religious fanatism or fundamentalism, then it will get broader acceptance from everyone and people will not sympathize. Now the meat eaters are sympathizing with the Muslims and everybody else, saying, oh, why can't you eat the cow? And the Westerners saying, oh, the cow is roaming on the street, people are hungry, why don't you eat them? So it sounds very convenient logic, and then everyone looking, the government looking foolish now. Because they are the only thing they can say is in our Hindu scripture it says don't kill the cow. That's not going to convince people. That's why Prabhupada said in the 7 purposes of ISKCON, the first purpose is to systematically spread this knowledge to the people at large. Because not everyone become a devotee. So to get wider acceptance and at a broader level, we can say non-violence to animals. We can point out, and people are more interested, we can say yes, killing animals, as you rightly said, not just the cow. Cow is of course the most serious. Killing any animal leads to violence amongst human beings, so now terrorist attacks are happening. Now they may not accept what we are saying, but it will make them think. Now discussing this with our colleagues at Westpac in New Zealand, they started Bhagavad Gita classes by Krishna's mercy. So before I'm leaving they started. But anyway, it's good once or twice a week we have classes. Please come inside, Matri. There's a lot of space here. Just come in. Come. So, when I explain to them like this, they say, that makes sense. Yeah, you commit violence here and you get violence here. Like the Devamati Maharaj says, you have sense gratification here, you have problems here. But you don't see the connection. Sometimes you don't see the connection. Why am I having problems here? But here you got sense gratification. You're doing something sinful. And here the problem is manifesting. So there is a connection, but we can't see it. So to get broader appeal, there are so many reasons. Higher taste, just read higher taste. So many examples are given of why we should not eat meat. Health reasons, ecological reasons, economic reasons, physiological reasons. Our body is not designed for eating meat. May explain like that. And environmental pollution, such a big topic now. Even politically, they can get more mileage out of environmental pollution. They can get the statistics correct, get the facts right, and show how cow killing is causing environmental damage. That alone will give them enough support from the wider public. Because not everybody is a hardcore meat eater. They are eating meat because they don't know any better. They are in ignorance. So they are quite willing to switch if someone just told them the reason why they should switch. Some rational, logical reason, not because Hinduism says like that. That's not very appealing. Even amongst the Hindus, they are not. There's no buy-in for that. This is a very weak presentation. That's why this. So when Prabhupada writes about these topics, ahimsa and non-violence, he takes it to the at the highest level. 26 qualities are described at the highest level. How to connect that to Krishna consciousness. Not everyone will come to that level. Others may come to the level of, at least you can bring them to the level of mode of goodness. That's why it's called divine quality here, mode of goodness. But when it's connected to Krishna, it becomes not just sattva but shuddha sattva, pure goodness. And that is where Prabhupada is taking us, to pure goodness, not just mundane truthfulness, mundane non-violence, mundane simplicity. Gandhi also lived very simply, but he was not Krishna conscious. So living simply is nice, it's conducive to Krishna consciousness, but it's not the goal of our life. That's why Prabhupada would say, we are not vegetarians, we are prasaditarians. Because vegetarian also ultimately said, what's the use? Monkey is also vegetarian. Certainly is better than someone eating meat, but that does not bring us to the transcendental level. Therefore keeps us within the material world, bound to cycle of birth and death. Therefore ultimately it's got no real value. If it helps you to become Krishna conscious, then it is useful. If it doesn't, then it's not, the benefit is not being fully realized. Does that make sense? So you see, a topic like non-violence, ahimsa, Prabhupada has got such a deep understanding for us. And as devotees we can give so much a broader perspective on any subject. Understand things very clearly. That's why when I did the class in Westpac the first time, they were so amazed. They said, so much knowledge is there, in Prabhupada's books on topics which we take for granted. For example, ahimsa, I thought I knew, I figured it all out. Just don't be violent, that's all. And Prabhupada made a good point. You made a good point about emotionally violent, on emotional level, physical level, emotional level, psychologically. There's so many ways that violence can be enacted.
At the moment, the Australian government is trying to protect the women from domestic violence as well. So,
Yeah.
like they are putting more and more funds into the domestic violence, but they are not going to the root cause of it, which is actually the intoxication, which is actually fueling that. But they are saying that we can't stop people from intoxicating, but we are trying to stop the people from doing the domestic violence. So it's not addressing the root cause.
Very good point. Prabhupada would say, give us that money, we will help you to stop these things. Because when you stop intoxication, then naturally there is a less chance of these things occurring. When the regulative principles are not followed strictly, then there is a degradation of dharma. Like dharma, the bull is standing on 4 legs. The last leg of is truthfulness. And it's interesting, I was reading the purport there. Prabhupada said truthfulness doesn't mean just speaking the truth. He says truthfulness means, one devotee asked actually in our discussion in Wellington, how come you're saying there's truthfulness, but there's so much lying going on these days, cheating, lying, so much, right from the top politician to the lowest level, all lying. Where is the truthfulness is there? But you see, now if you really examine what actually truthfulness means, if you go to the much deeper level, means Prabhupada says truthfulness is there because people, if you talk about Krishna, still some people are willing to listen. That is truthfulness. Now you don't expect that to be called truthfulness, isn't it? That means there are some people who won't listen to the truth. If you are willing to listen to the truth, that is truthfulness. That's pretty amazing. Not just speaking, not telling a lie, that's okay one level. But willing to hear the absolute truth is a sign of truthfulness. And that is the last hope of Kali Yuga. Kalir dosha nidhe rajan. I can see Srimal Prabhu excited. Before you forget.
Just on that, Prabhu, I asked that question, it wasn't answered earlier. That the other three pillars, Prabhu, like we are saying that they are not there in Kali, only truthfulness is there to some extent. So why truthfulness and why not the others? Why is it that the others are now all gone and only truthfulness is there?
Because you see, the way the degradation happens, because those legs are related to the regulative principles, isn't it? So meat eating kills. It is rampant. Meat eating is rampant now. So that kills mercy. One leg gone. People are more and more addicted to sinful activities. And the second one is intoxication. That kills austerity. So people can't do much austerity nowadays. Just to be clean, take a bath is an austerity. They rather put perfume and go to work rather than take bath. So there is problem there. Cleanliness also is not able to maintain. Similarly, what is the other one? Mercy, austerity, cleanliness. Cleanliness would elicit sex. That also people are not able to follow. So then you see, the only thing that is left is that we can hear something. That is the only thing that is available. So that one requires the least amount of qualification. Truthfulness is gambling, is disturbed by gambling. So that's why those who are not involved in gambling so much, at least those people are willing to hear something. That's a much more doable thing rather than not eat meat, not drink alcohol, not have illicit sex. Very difficult to imagine for anyone healthy to follow these 3 principles. It's very hard for them. Gambling also they do so much, but not to the same extent, to the same scale, not to the same proportions. And that's my understanding anyway. That's why, and also Krishna gives a little leeway. The discussion between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Raya, they said, what is the highest perfection of human life? And they conclude by saying that hearing Krishna Katha from a bona fide source, bona fide devotees, that is the beginning of pure bhakti. So that is one outlet Krishna has given. Kalir dosha nidhe rajan astek mahan guna kirtana deva krishnasya mukta sangha param rajat. Simply by chanting the holy names. And chanting means someone has to hear also, right? So hearing is there. So that is the one quality that is still allowing people to redeem themselves. So of all the four legs, that is the most important leg. And that leg helps to reconstruct other legs. Once that leg comes, once you start hearing from the and associating devotees, one will stop meat eating, one will stop alcohol, one will stop gambling, everything will stop. Then naturally the four legs of Dharma will be strong again. So that one leg has the capacity to regenerate the other legs as the heart of living entity changes. That's what Srimad Bhagavatam says, Viplava. This is a revolution. This message is a revolution meant to change the heart of the conditioned soul. So Prabhupada is praying in Jaladuta, that from the poem he wrote, right? Please make my language understandable to these people. People are covered in mode of passion and ignorance. They don't want to hear anyone. They're not willing to listen to the message. So he is praying, make my words suitable for their understanding. Yeah?
At the moment I was actually, when Prabhu mentioned the point, I was actually discussing that over the lunch table with my colleagues. The governments at the moment are actually incurring so much tax from the other three legs which of the Dharma, they cannot even close it and they cannot stop it anymore. So basically they incur more tax by selling a lot of liquors.
Yeah.
Then they actually incur a lot of tax by the abattoirs and cow export and all these things. And on top of that, the illicit activities which are day in and day out on the TV, they are not able to stop that as well. So as that's why the three legs are actually getting basically cut off, like unless and until we have that Dharma, and none of the politicians are honest and truthful. So now that leg is also, because they are the rulers or the kings.
Correct.
So that leg is also going to get diminished very
Yeah,
soon.
it's diminishing with Kali Yuga, that's true. It's not that leg is strong. But that's the only hope we have. At least some people will be able to listen. It's heard and sung by those who are thoroughly honest in heart. Bhagavatam is heard by those who are honest. There are still some honest people willing to listen to the Bhagavatam. So that's why the hope is there of regenerating, coming back, bringing Dharma back.
Prabhu, just another point on the previous question, why non-violence? On a longer term, but the economical factor, I think that's a very strong view, In fact, there was a discussion where I was having a dinner with some senior people in the office, and obviously I was having vegetarian so that discussion it started, and my previous boss, he was talking about again, like, okay, I don't eat meat for a certain period of time, and that's good because there's so much of grains is which
Safe.
feeds that is safe. So that thinking is there.
Yeah,
So that's a
that's
very strong convincing.
Yeah, very nice, yeah,
So
true.
that's a very convincing point.
Every conversation we have, we drop a little atom bomb, boom, we start thinking. And
So that was just to corroborate that.
yeah, that's right. People start, consciousness starts altering. Maybe at a very slow rate. May not happen as fast as you would like to, but it's definitely happening. The effect is there.
But what I want to also say is that one thing that we say is that the Vedic or the in schools, and that's a longer term thing. We don't have any kind of spiritual education. Is that something that should be again given as a advice?
Correct. That's what is Prabhupada's recommendation. Duhai Nam Sankirtan. Facilitate that. He told the government, he told the police officer in Chicago, it's there in Science Self-Realization, said, you allow us to do Sankirtan in the city everywhere, and the crime rate will come down. See, so many ways it affects. The holy name is so powerful, is Krishna. Any form, prasadam, books, in the form of Harinam, in the form of devotees, association, temples, so many ways it's affecting. So the holy name enters the ears of those unfortunate people, they become very fortunate.
On the same note, when we have the discussion and people doesn't want to accept what we are telling, I actually put this point forward that most of the times helps me, is if you go and tell an intoxicated person that stop drinking, he is not in the, his senses are not there, his brain, it is not getting registered. So if I am telling you that stop eating meat, there is no point as long as, unless and until you stop eating it, and then you listen to me, then it makes sense. Because if you tell the intoxicated person who is on the drugs, and you go and tell him that stop taking drugs, it is hampering your health, he is not in the mood of listening, or is not in the consciousness. So there is no point we discussing it over unless and until you take some action. Otherwise, the discussion could go on for a long time.
True. That's why Prabhupada's solution is very simple. He said increase prasad distribution rather than stop cow killing, which may not be accepted. Increase prasad distribution. That they can't complain. If you go and give out more prasad to everyone, the more they eat prasad, the less they'll have a taste for meat. More harinam, more books, then the hearts will change. And that is the way, not only then they'll stop on their own. The government doesn't have to enforce it anymore. That's called param dushta nivartate, higher taste. So you see, just one topic, violence, non-violence, there is so many aspects to it, isn't it? So in the interest of time, we'll move on. But I'm sure we'll appreciate Prabhupada. His contribution is so valuable, so immense. Okay, Dasha Prabhu, read next paragraph.
Satyam, this word means that one should not distort the truth for some personal interest. In Vedic literature, there are some difficult passages, but the meaning or the purpose should be learned from a bona fide spiritual master. This is the process for understanding Vedas. Shruti means that one should hear from the authority. One should not construe some interpretation for his personal interests. There are so many commentaries on Bhagavad Gita that misinterpret the original text. The real import of the word should be presented, and that should be learned from a bona fide spiritual master. Should I continue from?
Yeah.
Krodha means to check anger. Even if there is provocation, one should be tolerant. For once one becomes angry, his whole body becomes polluted. Anger is a product of mode of passion and lust. So one who is transcendentally situated should check himself from anger. Appreciation means that one should not find fault with others or correct them unnecessarily. Of course, to call a thief is not fault finding, but to call an honest person a thief is very much offensive for one who is making advancement in spiritual life. Hiri means one should be very modest and must not perform some act which is abominable. Achapalam, determination means that one should not be agitated or frustrated in some attempt. There may be failure in some attempt, but one should not be sorry for that. He should make progress with patience and determination.
Very good. So we covered two qualities now. One is Satyam, another is Akrodha, freedom from anger. So what are the main points of Satyam?
Satyam, as you have rightly pointed out just before, that we have to learn the truth from the right source, the proper authorities. Otherwise it is Nana Muni, Nana Matam, and one will be bewildered and they will not get. So we have to get the truth, that is learn about the absolute truth from the right source.
Very good. So let's extend that discussion. So Satyam, any other realize? Very good. That's a good summary. Thank you. What else is there in Satyam? Please use the microphone. Yeah.
says a misinterpretation of Bhagavad Gita
Yeah.
summaries or summaries.
Yeah, correct. Misrepresenting the scriptures. Very good. What else?
One should not interpret or pass the message of Bhagavad Gita for one's own personal interest.
Yes. Not only one should misinterpret, but one should not use the Shastra for one's personal interest, because one may give the proper meaning but use out of context, not in the right context. So that sometimes happens with devotees. When they argue, they say, but Prabhupada said like this, and they pull the sentence out of context. That's how the whole Ritvik theory started. It is they're speaking from Prabhupada's words, but it has been interpreted for some personal gain. That's why it's not absolute truth. So very good, very good. That's a very good point. Yeah.
Because Prabhu, that leads to this this mindset of controlling others.
Yeah.
So once we have personal interest, then that leads to the thinking that okay, I want the other person to hear what I'm saying,
Yeah.
so that I can control him or her.
Yeah. So that means one is not being truthful. So you see, so truthful is such an amazing thing. Again, we think that truthful means speaking the truth literally. That's of course there at one level. But here again, Prabhupada takes it to the highest level. Speaking absolute truth without personal motivation. Because one can speak from the Shastra with an agenda, and that still distorts the truth. Just like when the Pandavas sent Krishna as a Shantidut, a messenger of peace, to the Kauravas camp, said, don't fight, let's compromise. We'll accept 5 villages, make a deal and you take the kingdom. So Krishna went as a Shantidut. So when Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana heard that Krishna is coming to make peace with us, Dhritarashtra didn't want that. What did Dhritarashtra want? He wanted war. Why did he want war? Because war means his sons will win and the Pandavas will be killed. The thorn in the side is gone. Okay, without war, if they compromise, Pandavas still alive. Tomorrow they will again fight. Today they run back. Tomorrow they'll come. The threat is always there. So the only way to remove the threat is to kill them completely. Huh? Yeah, that's right. So he thought, okay, the best thing to do is to have the war, and my son should win. Because having the war and son is dying is not very good. That's not what he calculated. So they made arrangement for Krishna when he was coming. Before he came only, at the entrance of Hastinapur, they made arrangement for him to be given lots of cows and 108 cows, gold plated with gold on the back, and so many servants and so much silver and diamonds and rubies and huge amount of. They thought if we can do this, we can please Krishna. Then he'll say, "What do you want?" And then we'll say, or we can ask, "What do you want?" So we're going to win. So Vidura was there. He was listening to the plan, and he thought, father and son both are stupid. No wonder they got into so much trouble. He told, it's a very good idea that you want to give gift to Krishna, but your motivation is not good. Your motivation is not correct. So giving in charity is definitely recommended in Shastra. We already read that, right? Charity. But if the charity is given with the wrong motivation, the wrong person, wrong place, wrong time, then that is the mode of ignorance. Charity is mode of ignorance. That's coming in the 17th chapter. Next chapter only, yeah. So that's why, though the action appears to be according to Shastra, giving charity is very much recommended, but the motivation is not right. Therefore, that is not considered truthfulness. So truthfulness extends even there. So you can see these qualities overlap as well. Which means, if one has divine qualities, one naturally develops all of them, because they're all interconnected. Yesterday we were discussing this also in Wellington, and one devotee made the point that if I chant inattentively, I'm not being truthful. I thought that's a very good point actually. For the sake of chanting, I'm chanting, and I'll tell everyone, look, I did my 16 rounds today. But I didn't pay attention to even one mantra. So I am not being truthful. So then by the Bhakti Vriksha we asked, okay, what is your practical application of this quality, 26 qualities? Truthfulness. And devotee said, I'll try to chant attentively. That's my truthfulness. I promised my spiritual master I'll chant 16 rounds every day. And I'm going to make it attentive now. That is also truthfulness. So, yeah, it's a very good point. Just elaborating on your point. Yeah. Do you have anything else to add there? Anybody else?
I think on a very
You keep that side on the side.
very basic level, Prabhu, I think when the tax time comes, the truthfulness, I think we can see how truthful we are to ourselves.
Yeah, that's right.
On a very, very basic level.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, Prabhupada actually says that one should follow the laws of the land as far as possible. But for Krishna consciousness, one is prepared to compromise. Just like, but it has to be for Krishna's pleasure, for Krishna's service. Just like Yudhishthira Maharaj had to tell Ashwathama is dead. Now many people argue that he was a liar. He became a liar because of associating Krishna. He also started lying. They blame Krishna for that. Krishna is always like this, and he is the one who told him all this. He was actually a simple, honest guy, but Krishna spoilt him. That's why envious of Krishna. They don't understand Krishna is absolute truth. And then they use their own mundane sense of justice and their own sense of morality, and they blame Krishna for making Yudhishthira dishonest. And they even say that Yudhishthira Maharaj's chariot, see, you are blocking the camera when you walk across, okay? Please, yeah. So Daddy is trying to tell you. You play one side or sit down, listen, you're a big boy now. Both of you have become big boys now. You should sit and listen, I'm sure you can understand. We're talking about truthfulness. Do you tell the truth all the time? He's honest. See, now you understood? See, you should take part in discussion. We are discussing simple things, not very complex grown-up things. You can sit and talk, and slowly you learn. One day you'll start giving class then. You're already doing nice kirtan. So, giving a talk on Bhagavad Gita will be good. Sometimes devotee children, they go to the school and they show and tell that read from Bhagavad Gita. Do you have show and tell in your classroom? Do you have show and tell in the classroom? Yeah. And then you can speak from Bhagavad Gita. Yeah. You can talk about these things are there. Truthfulness. So this truthfulness has a much broader connotation. So saying what Krishna wants, pleasing to Krishna, service to Krishna, that takes the ultimate precedence. Even if devotees, are mundane point of view, they may not appear to be honest. But by default, a devotee is in a mode of goodness, as you said, and one should follow the laws of the land as far as possible. But at the same time, if for Krishna, one should be prepared to do the needful. This,
In the case of Ashwatthama, to achieve a higher dharma, that's where Ashwatthama Kujaraha, that's what dharma is right. So to achieve a higher dharma, it is possible to make the untruth statement.
If it is pleasing to Krishna. That's the criteria. Like Arjuna prepared to fight because it's pleasing to Krishna. Though he gave a lot of reasons in the first chapter why he should not fight. They're all moral reasons based on morality. And based on morality, he was right. But that is not what Krishna wanted. He wanted to establish Dharma. That was his purpose. So for that it didn't serve the purpose. So following Dharma according to Arjuna's proposal in the first chapter would mean the Dharma would not be established. That means Duryodhana would go scot-free because of damage to others, to society, damage to women, children, all these things he says. In the interest of that, better I don't fight and cause a disturbance. But Krishna made a stand, enough is enough. You give them enough chances to rectify and they haven't. Now time has come to pull the plug. And even now, even as I mentioned just now, he went as a peace messenger to the Pandavas, to the Kauravas. Said, give them 5 villages, they'll still give you the kingdom. But when Duryodhana said, I won't give enough land to put a needle inside, and that's when he crossed the limit, and he crossed the line. So Krishna gives chance to everyone. Like Parikshit Maharaj, he gave Kali Purush the chance. Alright, you go and stay where there's the meat eating, gambling, intoxication, illicit sex. Again, when connected to today's discussion, truthfulness, and he couldn't find any place. And finally said, you still have to give me a spot. He said, alright, go where this gold is not used, being hoarded, not used in Krishna's service. And that he found a spot. And then he started expanding his influence from there. And that's how Kali Yuga took off. Otherwise, until Krishna was there, Kali Yuga didn't come. Even Parikshit Maharaj also didn't allow him. Such a righteous king. But because Kali Purusha very cleverly took shelter of Parikshit Maharaj, he could not reject him also. So we have these situations in our life also. When someone comes and asks you for help, we have to see whether we have the capacity to help or not. If I don't have the capacity, I shouldn't try to help, I should try to get help. So this is a big topic now, domestic violence. If we get involved, it's very dangerous because we are not equipped to do that. So that's why the right thing to do is to get help. Now the government is all geared up to help in this matter. Counseling services, this service, that service. Get the right people involved. That we are doing the right thing. If we start saying, I'll pull out a stethoscope and start doing treatment and say, okay, I'll do heart surgery, I'll do this, I'll do that. That's very dangerous for us and for others as well. But if you give the right advice to them and guide them, see, call a doctor, I think it'll be alright. Or call the ambulance, as the case may be. And we don't make the decision what they are going to take. So that is being satyam, being truthful.
One more saying in Telugu, Mooru abaddalu chesina pedi cheyichu. That is, to get two people get married, you make even 100 asatyas.
Yes.
For business.
Yeah, that is true. That's true. These are all mundane things. Even in business purposes, one has to tell a lie. To do business, one has to tell a lie. She says, you can tell the customer, I'm not making any profit, I'm giving you at cost price. And that's a lie. So that's why material activity, in every activity there is some fault. So the father or the daughter is doing kanyadan by telling lies about the kanya. Similarly, the businessman is selling his product by telling lies about the product. Or about its cost or whatever aspect of it. They don't tell you the truth. If they tell you the truth, then you won't buy it. So that fault is always going with us. So rather than try to get perfection in material life, we try to make our life Krishna conscious. A fault is unavoidable. See, like the Jains, you see, they tie their mouth, they put a handkerchief on the mouth and they put all that mask to stop killing of animals and all that, insects and bacteria and all that. But how far can you take that? You walk, you step on something, you can't avoid it. So rather than go on that path, try to make our existence Krishna conscious. So that even if you do step on an ant accidentally, not deliberately, accidentally, touching the lotus feet of a devotee, the dust from the lotus feet of a devotee, the ant gets human birth. The ant is blessed. So actually doing a favor to the ant. The ant will die anyway in 7 days. But if he dies under the feet of a devotee, imagine how blessed he is. That's why Lord Shiva prays to Krishna. Please let me be a particle of dust in Vrindavan when you come and perform your Leela, Vraj Leela. I want to see your Leela, even as a particle of dust. And Krishna says, no, don't worry, you don't have to be a particle of dust. You can become a mountain and Nand Baba will build a palace on you. It's called Nandeshwar. So like that, Krishna's thing, Leela, ultimately to serve Krishna is the real goal. That's why the gopis say, we don't mind take the dust from our feet and put on Krishna's head. If you have to go to hell, we'll go to hell. That is surrender. Yudhishthira Maharaj refused to say Ashwatthama is dead. Arjuna hesitated and questioned Krishna before he agreed to fight. Gopis didn't question anything. They said, Krishna's headache has to be cured. Doesn't matter what happens to us. We are of no consequence. They're not just saying it, they are actually that surrendered to Krishna. Ultimate truthfulness. That pleases Krishna. So that's why the mundane sense, our own, because the problem is we try to become judges and try to judge people, judge everyone. He's right, she's wrong, this is right, that is wrong. Very quickly we become very judgmental. But here the truthfulness quality is saying that sometimes you have to judge. If you are an elder, if you are a head of the family, if you are some kind of a leader, you have to make some judgment. You can't say I'll be neutral all the time. One has to make a call. But if you base it on what is pleasing to Krishna, that is better than mundane morality. And very hard for us to shift from that. We are so trained in mundane morality. You see, mundane morality is so dangerous. They are concerned with domestic violence, but they are not concerned about violence to animals. That's all right. That's considered quite cool. They are concerned about violence to dogs and cats, but they are not concerned about violence to cows. Even among the animals, they are not clear, isn't it? If you kill a dog, that's considered very big aparadh. But you kill a cow, nobody is bothered about it. So you see, there is no logic behind this. There is no sense. But we get influenced by this. We think, oh, this is the right thing to do. Very advanced, civilized society. That's okay. So don't go by these things. We go by the Shastra. We go by what is pleasing to Krishna. That is truthful. That is the highest benefit. So truth, Krishna Prabhupada explaining, is taking to the level of absolute truth. So truthful means not misinterpreting the Shastra, not using the Shastra to gain some personal advantage. So therefore the truthfulness means hearing from the right, as Dasharat Priya said, to hear from the right sources. Then we get the proper understanding, otherwise we get a distorted understanding. Yesterday in the office they were telling me that, I read this Bhagavad Gita, I think Gandhi's Bhagavad Gita. He says that the 5 Pandavas are the 5 senses and 5 horses, and Kurukshetra is our mind, battlefield and all that. It's not real. Gandhi gives interpretation like that. Now if you go by that, what happens? Everything is false. Bhagavad Gita is false, Bhagavatam is false. Why bother reading? Let's go to the movies. So people end up doing sinful activities. That's the reason the popularity of movies and entertainment has become so popular, because everything is false anyway, might as well enjoy it then. That's the logic. Bhagavad Gita is also false, movie is also false. So let me go for this illusion. That's also illusion, this is also illusion. This is the result of Mayavad philosophy. So Mayavad is the ultimate untruth. Now you're getting really worked up. Because they're denying the personality of God. They're denying the absolute truth. They're saying absolute truth has no form, there's no personality. So that is the highest, that is the greatest, that is spiritual suicide. Greatest danger. Yes, Nityananda Prabhu?
I just had another answer for your question as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
I've heard a different explanation to that, which is that anything Krishna says is actually the truth. It's just that his words have so many different layers of meanings that you may not be able to appreciate them. But everything he says is actually true. Like, for example, when he told Yudhishthir Maharaj to say that Ashwatthama is dead, you can actually take that to mean that Ashwatthama is simply a material body. It's not referring to the actual soul, the person inside. So when he says Ashwatthama is dead, that material body is dead because it's just a lump of matter. So when he told Yudhishthira Maharaj to say that, he was telling the truth. And Yudhishthira Maharaj would have said the truth as well. So when he refused to obey Krishna, that was telling a lie because Krishna had told the truth in the first place.
Yeah, very true.
So that's why his chariot went down.
Very good.
And it's the same thing, like if, for anything Krishna says, let's say Krishna says the sky is green. You'd probably say Krishna's telling a lie, the sky is blue. But even from a material perspective, I heard this recently, that let's say you look at this color. What does that look like to you? let's say green, right? Apparently, even according to science, every single person looks at the same thing and sees something different. Like no two people sees exactly the same color right there.
And he's already said it. If one is colorblind, one can't see it anyway.
That's a different thing.
That's a good example. Yeah, go on.
But every single person sees that color differently. So if Krishna looks at that and says it's green, he is describing it using transcendental vision, whereas we have faulty, varied vision. So if he says something's true, it's the truth. It's we who have faulty vision.
Yeah. That's a very good point. Yeah, very nice. Oh yeah, please.
Krishna Prabhu, in continuation of the same thing, what Yudhishthira Maharaj knew that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So
Yes.
whatever he says, it is the truth.
Yeah.
So there's no question of him not saying what Krishna says, not doing what Krishna says. But on the other hand, if we take the case of Duryodhana or anybody else, they will say that it is a lie because they don't know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality.
Absolute truth.
Probably.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah, that's right. Very good. That's a very good point. So but even among the Pandavas is different. You see, Yudhishthira Maharaj refused to listen to Krishna. Arjuna agreed, but with some discussion. So amongst that's why a question is often asked: why Arjuna selected to hear Bhagavad Gita, not Yudhishthira? Arjuna is Bhakta and Sakha, more intimate relationship with Arjuna than with Yudhishthira or Bhima or Nakul. They are all his devotees, but Arjuna is more intimate. Yeah, very good point. Thank you.
Prabhu, always the thought comes into my mind that, as you said, even Parikshit Maharaj, when he gave 4 places to Kali and Kali couldn't find that places to live, then I always think that what went wrong and everything just fall apart. So is that just because of the effect of Kali, or what? How we understand that?
Yeah, good question. Everyone understood the question? Everyone heard the question? Yes? Yeah. So why did Krishna let it happen? Because it is Krishna's desire ultimately. He wanted Kali Yuga to start. The plan is the Yuga should go in a cycle. And Krishna wanted Kali Yuga to come. That's why he arranged the whole situation. Everything is done with the purpose by Krishna, right? Parikshit Maharaj cursed so that Srimad Bhagavatam could be spoken. Duryodhana misbehaved so that the Bhagavad Gita can be spoken. So everything has a purpose. Krishna does. The 4 Kumaras cursed Jaya Vijay so that he could have these pastimes. Prahlad Maharaj would come and so the devotees of the Lord have so many desires. To fulfill the desires, Krishna makes all these elaborate plans. Ultimately, Krishna does everything for the pleasure of his devotees, and devotees do everything for the pleasure of Krishna. Very innovative. He is being truthful. Yes, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu, on that point, so Krishna says nimitta matrena.
Correct.
So it's just, you're just a nimitta. You're just
Instrument.
You're just an instrument because it has to happen. Like what?
Yeah, correct.
I
Krishna's
think,
will.
And plus also, in terms of Krishna consciousness, I remember you once telling the bus is already going. It's up to you whether you want to get onto the bus and go to the destination.
Correct.
Because in any way, there are.
Yeah, that's right.
Prabhupada's mission is going to.
Opportunity is there.
Exactly, and Prabhupada's, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission is definitely there.
Yeah, that's true. So people can say so many things. So if you are fixed in the truth, you not get deviated. That's what Krishna says. Once that's established, one number deviates from the truth. It's like yesterday, day before yesterday, I think someone was discussing that if Krishna, why did Krishna is God? Why did he marry 16,108 wives? Why is he so immoral? And why is he dancing with gopis in the middle of the night, not even married to them? There's another one, they say Krishna is asatya, not truthful. They're worshipping God who is not truthful. How do you respond to that? You gave a good example of Yudhishthira Maharaj. You took up that example. Now here's another one. Commonly asked by people, isn't it?
No.
Yes.
So you wanted the answer for this, or?
Yeah, I'm giving another scenario
Okay.
where it appears that truthfulness is not being followed by Krishna.
Yeah. Because Prabhu, Krishna is the cause of everything.
Yeah.
So if Krishna is the cause, then how can you question the cause?
Correct. Very
Whatever
good.
Krishna does
Yes.
is actually the right thing, because whatever, if he is the cause and if you are there because of him, then how you can question him?
Correct. Very good. All right. Good. Any other answers? Please use the microphone. Huh? That's what people can hear. Huh?
If I am not wrong, Prabhupada also asked the same questions in a gathering, that how come Krishna can dance with other people's wife and in the midnight and all these things. And Prabhupada rightly pointed out that everything belongs to Krishna, and who is sitting next to you? And that person said that she is my wife. No, you are sitting with Krishna's wife, because she also belongs to Krishna, like that, Prabhupada.
Actually, that's true.
Yeah.
So you are the one who is a debauchee, not Krishna. Yeah, that's true. Very good point. Please use the microphone.
Right?
No, that's a good
It's
point.
like
You are on a good
because
track.
he danced because each and every person, the gopi, had a desire to be with Krishna.
Very good.
So unless until we have a desire, Krishna doesn't come to
snatch
you.
somebody's wife and dance with
that's
them like Ravan did. No, I tried to do that. Yeah, Ravan did also. So many demigods' wives he kidnapped. That was his pastime. Yes, Mataji.
Prabhu, this the reply which Dasharatha Prabhu gave, how do we like this is okay? We can understand what
As devotees.
as a material level.
Yeah.
If we say somebody that everything belongs to Krishna and they are all already his wives, that answer doesn't really.
Not accepted.
Yes. So how do we explain to
Yeah.
those kind of people?
Yeah, that's true. That's why the answers are given at different levels. You're right. According to the audience, the answers to be given. So that's a very valid point. We can quote Prabhupada, but we have to be careful what we say to whom. But another level is that all of them are actually married to Krishna, all the gopis. In the past time that happened, when Brahma stole the cowherd boys, for 1 year they were absent from Vrindavan, and Krishna duplicated himself with the cowherd boys. And that time, when little Krishna, looking up at his father, says, I think you should get all the boys and girls married. He makes a proposal to his father. I think, did I tell that last time? I think I did sometime. Some class I might have told, anyway. And Nanda Maharaj saying, wow, that's a good advice. I don't know, that time Krishna was 4 or 5 year old. Talking to his father, Dad, you should get all the boys and girls married. The Gopas and Gopis married. He said, it's a very auspicious day. So that day, all the Gopas got married to the Gopis. They were all matched up and they were married. And later on, the original Gopas came and they still thought that they are married to this Gopi. So Krishna didn't dance with somebody else, he was already married to them. In fact, other Gopas was with Krishna's wife. Really, now that's what brings in line what you are saying. I heard this from Jayapatak Maharaja. He was saying that actually they were all married to Krishna anyway. Radharani is already married to Krishna, eternally. But for sake of pastime, she is married to somebody else. Then the Parakya Rasa can come out. And Prabhupada says, be very careful. Parakya Rasa in the material world is the most deadly poison. But in the spiritual world, it's the highest ecstasy. So, better we don't discuss these topics with new people. That's the first recommendation of Prabhupada, isn't it? Amongst devotees, we can discuss all this. That's the first 9 cantos are describing Krishna's glories. Then a 10th canto starts his birth and activities. 9 cantos to establish Krishna as supreme absolute truth. And the 10th canto is Rasa is not the first chapter. First chapter is Krishna's appearance and prayers by demigods and then killing of all the demons and everything else. And finally, Rasa Leela comes in the much later chapters. All his Bal Leelas are mentioned. 9th chapter is about Damodar Leela, we just read recently. So it goes well into the 10th canto that Rasa Leela is described. By that time, the reader has enough understanding of Krishna's position to not look at him from their own perspective. Because our problem is we like to see Krishna from our perspective. I can't lift a mountain, so Krishna can't lift a mountain. I can't maintain 16,000 wives, so Krishna can't do it. What kind of logic is this? Then what is absolute truth then? And that's because of misinterpreting. That is because of asatyam. So many mundane scholars have given wrong interpretations of the Bhagavatam and say it's all fiction, it's all imaginary. The British also, they promoted such understanding so they could minimize our culture, so that they can establish their cow killing culture and remove Vedic culture. But Prabhupada, like that, devotees like Prabhupada and Acharyas, they're very fixed in absolute truth. They don't deviate. You can't fool them with any logic like that. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had Swarup Damodar. He was his secretary. Anyone wrote anything, first has to be edited by Swarup Damodar. Only then he will give to Lord Chaitanya. If it is according to Sadhu Shastra Guru, according to the conclusions of the Bhagavatam, then only he will allow them to give it to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Correct me if I'm wrong. This, in Bhagavatam, this Ras Leela is supposed to happen when Krishna is only 9 years or 10 years old.
Yeah.
So,
8 years I think. Yeah.
Exactly.
7 years he lifted Govardhan Hill when you're 7 years old.
Exactly.
Eighth year he did Ras Leela.
So, when people talk, we're talking about, even in the material platform, we're talking about an 8-year-old boy.
Yeah. Correct. Prabhupada actually mentions that point. Very good. Very good point. So it can't be based on lust. Yeah. And furthermore, in the middle of the Ras Leela, Krishna disappears. If he was really lusty, surrounded by beautiful women, he could not have left that beautiful gopis. He could not have left that scene. Any ordinary man would not have been able to give up at that stage, walking away. That shows, bring back the original point, that he is doing it for the pleasure of the devotees. He performed Ras Leela not for his enjoyment, but for giving enjoyment to the pleasure to the gopis, because they wanted it. Right? Very good. Nice point. Yeah, go on.
I don't know who said it, but it might have been you, Prabhu, but someone said recently that when Krishna performs his pastimes, whichever age group he's in, he's actually performing the pastimes of the next age group. So if he's 7 or 8 years old while he's performing the Rasa Leela, he's actually performing the pastimes in real life of someone who's around 15 or 16. And when he's 15 or 16 in Vrindavan, he's actually doing the things that someone between the ages of 16 to 25 is actually doing. So it's not that, materially speaking, it doesn't make sense, but he's actually doing the next age group's activities. That's how it works.
But Prabhupada actually told, that explanation Prabhupada did give, that 8-year-old cannot be influenced by lust. And Prabhupada is not giving his conclusion, that's from the previous acharyas. He quotes Jiva Goswami or somebody quotes and explains that 8-year-old cannot be influenced by lust, that age. Yeah. Anyway, there's so many aspects to it.
What I mean to say is that Krishna wouldn't be influenced by lust at any age.
In any case.
Anyway.
Yes.
But the point that doesn't make sense to a lot of people is, how could an 8-year-old do Rasa Leela? So
materialist person who challenges us, saying that, oh look, your God did this, your God did that, in order to convince them, or in order to argue with them. The scriptures say that this happened when Krishna was a little boy. So that is something which is there in the scriptures. That is something which Prabhupada has also mentioned, that an 8-year-old boy, like what Vijay Prabhu mentioned just now, that an 8-year-old boy cannot be guided by lust in order to do such a thing. So this is just in order to convince the materialistic and non-devotees. So that's the only point which is being made by this comment.
I actually have very, we can say, a childish question on this. When I started reading this, it struck me like a child. I was actually thinking, how can all these gopas and gopis so young can be in the middle of the jungle, or in the middle of the night as well? So then how can they be, it's Krishna's Leela that the Krishna can get out of the jail and everything. That's understandable, but this is kind of practical question hits me. It's like that. How can they be in the jungle then, at the middle of the night? So
that's also described in the Krishna book, in the Bhagavatam, that some of the gopis were stopped by their parents or husbands. They couldn't go. Some, they were feeding the baby, they stopped the baby there and ran. And some could not leave, some could leave. Those who could not leave, they died in separation. They gave up their bodies, they couldn't go. Krishna played the flute, they could not stop themselves. Whatever they were doing, they were in the middle of the combing the hair, the half combed hair, they just left and went. They were getting dressed up and half dressed, they still went like that. They were completely surrendered to Krishna like that. So that level of love and surrender is very hard to understand. That Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, the loving mood of the gopis is the highest among all devotees. It's the highest display of love, demonstration of love as to any other living being. Their level of surrender, their level of love is just incomprehensible. So, coming back to the point, these topics are not for discussion with people who are not familiar with Krishna consciousness. I would rather say, Prabhupada once told in Pune, he said, I am not qualified to discuss this topic. He point blank refused. He could see the audience just wanted to get some fun from Rasa Leela. That's why he condemned the Bhagavad Sapta, where they go directly to 10th canto. They don't bother reading other parts.
I'm trying to remember, was there Guru Maharaj or somebody, very senior devotee in the Bhagavatam class said that there is only one mention of Radharani in the entire Bhagavatam, like only one single mention of Radharani in Bhagavatam.
That's right.
And I can't remember who was that, but that's
yes, that's true. That too is mentioned. Aradhyate is mentioned in 10th canto. There's only one verse. Because if Sukadeva Goswami started talking about Radharani, he would be so ecstatic. He couldn't complete the Bhagavatam, and Parikshit Maharaj had deadline of 7 days. He didn't have unlimited time to do his Bhakti Vaibhava, Bhakti Vedanta in this case. I had to finish at a certain time, so he could not have described Radharani, so that's why he avoided that. But in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Chaitanya Charitamrita, then there is an elaboration on that. The Gopi Bhav and the Nectar of Devotion, they give the later parts of Nectar of Devotion. These are described. But not until you read Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam first, thoroughly studied them, then only we can appreciate those points. We can read them for purification, but we cannot appreciate those to the same extent. Because our maturity is not there, spiritual maturity. Okay? In the interest of time, we move on. The topic is very nice and there's a lot to discuss. So to summarize, truthfulness means not deviating from the scriptures, not using the scriptures for personal motivation, not misinterpreting it, and hearing from the bona fide spiritual master. One should hear, then it will have proper understanding and proper effect. Okay, the other point Dr. Priya Prabhu read was about freedom from anger, akrodha. So what are the points on that? Want to say something, Dr. Priya?
So here in this particular purport it is mentioned that how anger is affecting our consciousness, whole body becomes polluted. In the earlier chapters also it is mentioned that when somebody gets angry, how he loses his mind and bewilderment, and after that loses his intelligence and falls into the pool of so this is impediment in the path of bhakti. So
the source of anger? Yeah, and before that? Yeah. So starts with contemplation. Use the microphone. Other Skype devotees can't hear, or the Mayapur TV, they can't hear.
While contemplating the object of the senses, one develops attachment to it.
Yep. Then anger eventually goes to next verse. Buddhinasha pranashyati. So needs to fall down. Thank you. Yes, Mataji, you had something, Chadeshnath?
Prabhu, Srimad Bhagavatam says that lust and anger go together and calls anger as Kama Anujena. So Anuja means younger brother, and younger brother of lust is anger. Therefore they always go together, and they are Nitya Vairini, Mahashno, Mahapapam, Nitya Vairini. And then Prabhupada says, who can be your eternal enemy? An eternal enemy is one who wishes ill towards you. He doesn't have any good feelings towards you. But if you have an enemy in this lifetime, then he is restricted to just this. But because lust and krodh go together hand in hand, they are Nitya Vairini, because every time you take birth, these two will be there for you and they'll constantly destroy you. So we should be very cautious about it and try and control
yes,
it.
Very true. And so many diseases come because of psychosomatic effect of anger.
And also calls it as Mahashno, I mean voracious. It's like a black hole.
Yeah.
You keep pouring into it, but it never gets satisfied.
Mahashano, Mahapapma.
Yeah.
So that was Arjuna's question. Why does a living entity commit sin knowingly? Third chapter, right? You've done third chapter you're still in second chapter, yeah. Yeah, in your Bhakti Shastri. You can tell them, stay tuned. Yeah, so that's a very important point. And Arjuna asked the question, Krishna says, Kama Esha Krodesha. So it's very, and that probably mentions the next door neighbors. Very close to each other. So that's very nice. Kamanuja. It's very good. Very nice point. But at the same time, Prabhupada takes it to the next level and says, well, anger can be used in Krishna's service. Like Hanuman used anger to burn Lanka. So anger has a place. One should not be saying that, oh, no anger at all. That doesn't help. Again, mundane moralists, they condemn anger completely. They don't see the use of anger. Ultimately, anger can be used in Krishna's service. How can lust be used in Krishna's service? Yes. Lust is the pollution of love. When love is polluted, corrupted, in contact with the material modes, it gets transformed into lust. The original love for Krishna becomes perverted as lust. But when that lust is purified by Krishna consciousness, it comes back to the original consciousness of pure love for Krishna. And that pure love is free from lust. Very good. Any other points on freedom from anger? Jitendra Prabhu?
I just have a question.
Yeah.
I've read that anger is actually a subtle form of lust. And I don't mean in the sense that anger follows when lust is unsatisfied. I've read that anger itself it's a subtle form of lust. Could you please explain how that is?
I mean, as you yourself said that, I mean, when lust is not fulfilled, it leads to anger. So they are like next door neighbors, they're very next to each other. It's very hard to not go from lust to anger. Because what is lust after all? Is trying to enjoy separate from Krishna. Go back to the basic definition. Lust means propensity to enjoy separate from Krishna. Not giving pleasure to Krishna, but our own pleasure to our own senses. And when that is not fulfilled, naturally it leads to anger. And there will always be a problem to our enjoyment. There will always be some obstacle. Today I was hearing a Prabhupada lecture in the car as I was driving here, and he was speaking on the second chapter, text 8 and 9. So Arjuna says in the text 8 that I will not be happy even if I win an unrivaled kingdom and sovereignty like the demigods in heaven. The word unrivaled is very interesting because you may have a kingdom but you have a lot of rivals, you can't enjoy that. So in the material world you get some enjoyment but there are many threats to that enjoyment. What if you fall sick? What if you have an accident? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if your enemies come and do something to you? What if someone steals your money? Or, there are so many obstacles to your enjoyment. But Arjuna is saying, I will not be satisfied even if you get an unrivaled kingdom with no rivals. Everybody is very loving towards you and cooperative and supporting you in your sense gratification. Still you will not be satisfied. Still you won't be satisfied unless you engage in devotional service. Prabhupada takes it to the next level and says, only by taking the devotional service one will get the satisfaction. But on the other hand, if one has the biggest kingdom, unrivaled kingdom, with sovereignty like the demigods, still one will not be satisfied. So coming back to your question, at least that's my understanding, my level of understanding. Maybe you can ask more elevated souls, they might have more deeper understanding, I'm sure. That lust and anger go hand in hand. It's very hard to say only lust and stop there. Rarely one just stops there. It inevitably leads to anger because there will always be something. Lust never satisfies. The moment you're not satisfied, the natural reaction is anger.
I was just thinking in terms of, let's say you just get angry about something mundane, like something didn't go your way, or someone didn't do something you wanted, or they did something you didn't want them to do, and you get angry about that. Then it's not exactly directly correlated to lust in that sense.
It is, yeah.
Prabhupada says that, his exact words, lust is not just an erotic relationship between two opposite genders. It also means misuse of free will, and one definition is what you have given just now, to enjoy separate to Krishna. And he says the last definition is to have subtle, what's the word he uses? Desire for being heard, being respected. So puja, labh, pratishtha in the subtlest terms also are manifestations of lust. So if you want someone to do something per your desire, so it is my way or highway, then highways just get angry. So it will always be hand in hand, unless of course it's with your children. If you want them to do a particular thing because you wish well for them, then it's different.
Angry with Kali Purusha. That is not due to lust transform into anger. That as a king he wanted to protect Dharma. Kali Purusha was just as a Kshatriya was killing a bull. Right? So that anger is not as a result of lust. Properly utilized, under sense control. Whereas when lust degrades into anger, it is losing the self control. Because see, lust is mode of passion. When that lowers into mode of ignorance, it is anger. So anger is mode of ignorance, lust is mode of passion. Here's another perspective. That's it. Prabhupada mentions in that verse purport that kama yesha krodha yesha. That purport Prabhupada explains that wrath or anger is lust is mode of passion, and anger is, when it degrades into mode of ignorance, it's actually anger. Because the modes are not stable. Remember in the 14th chapter, modes are very unstable. They keep changing all the time. So you can't remain in the mode of passion all the time either. You can't be in the mode of goodness all the time. Neither can remain in mode of ignorance all the time. It keeps switching, and they're competing for supremacy. So lust and anger, so as you rightly said, lust, the subtle form of lust is wanting position and power. The subtle form of lust. And when that is not fulfilled, then that leads to anger. That's another aspect of it. I know you didn't get the answer. Yeah. Yeah. But you see, Krishna has told clearly that anger doesn't. But you see, Krishna never, in the second chapter, made very clear that anger has a source in lust. Material anger. Spiritual anger is not based on lust. Spiritual anger is based on love. Material anger is based on lust. You can't have material anger without lust in it. Let's put it that way. Even though that lust part may be hidden, or maybe, as Matthew said, in a more subtle way, it may be a more subtle form of it. But the lust has to be there. So let's get to the basics rather than complicating things. Let's keep it simple. Anger is two types, like material anger and spiritual anger. You understand that, right? I mean, you know all this. I'm just saying for discussion. This is for discussing it. So we have two types of anger, right? What is spiritual anger based on? Love for Krishna. Love. In other words, love for Krishna. Correct? Material anger, what is it based on? Self, this thing. I mean, enjoy separate from Krishna. That is lust. And that is what lust, definition of lust is, that only. So you can't get to anger any other way. That's my point. You have to go through this path. Yeah. So then now let's come back to your question. Yeah. Wait for some. Yes, that's the problem.
Anger is a product of the mode of passion and lust. One who is transcendentally situated should check himself from anger. So it is product of lust and mode of passion.
Passion, yeah, that's right. That's right. It is no. I mean, I can't see any other route to anger. Okay, give one more chance. We've got 5 minutes more. We'll wrap up here. Have one more go. Let's try one more time. Try to clarify. See, we're trying to understand which perspective you're coming from. At least I'm trying to understand. So please help us. Help me. Use the microphone and. But yeah, maybe the question not framed in a way that we are able to understand what you're trying to say. Sometimes it happens. So next class we can take it up. So you can frame the question in a better way so we can understand what you are trying to understand. Yeah. We're all making some factual statement, but not answering a question. Right? That's what happens sometimes. It goes, we go around the topic and trying to see whether this is what you really wanted. But it is good in any sense. We're exploring different aspects of it. Our understanding of anger is becoming clearer and clearer, hopefully. Yeah. So Prabhupada also mentions that it's that anger actually pollutes the whole body. That's another thing. Cause of so much disease. The people say cancer is a good example of that. It's suppressed anger for many, many years. It breaks out in form of disease like that. People get ulcers due to anger. And this material life today is so much full of anxiety. And there's so much injustice going on. And actually there's a lot of anger, isn't it? When we're treated unfairly. It's one thing to be treated unfairly outside, but if our own family does it, it's very painful. If it happens in a society of devotees, it's even more painful. Because we give up everything and come to Krishna consciousness. Now here I'm treated unfairly. And that anger is very hard to overcome. Because you feel that you're not being treated fairly. One starts feeling that I'm the victim. So these are some things which are very harmful for our physical health, emotional health and spiritual health also. Because very easily it can lead to offenses and just spoils our bhakti. That's why we need to have mentors and devotees who can guide us in these difficult times, so we can understand why these things are happening and see things from a different perspective. So we can reconcile these things and not lose our enthusiasm for progressing in Krishna consciousness. That's why preaching is very important. If you engage in preaching activities, we get special mercy from the Lord such that we see a bigger picture in all of these things and we won't get caught at the mundane level. One new book has been published now, written by Prema Padmini Mataji. It's called Free to Preach. It's a beautiful book. I saw it in Mayapur. I had a quick skim through the book. I haven't read it, but it's available now. I'm thinking of getting it for all our leaders. It shows all the trials and struggles they went through to build up the preaching in the Middle East. What are the challenges they faced and how difficult it was. But the most important message in that is showing how it doesn't need a great leader, a great person to become a leader, to become a preacher. Anyone can do it. You don't have to be very elevated soul, knowing lots of Sanskrit and lots of shlokas and all those wonderful things. Those are all secondary. And I'm thinking I'll try and get some copies of the book. Free to Preach. It's wonderful. Yeah. They're done. But this is a very nice, a book that's been recently been published now, and it's come out as a book now. And it's very wonderful. I saw a few episodes in that, very deep realizations and deep understandings. And for a leader, it's very important to understand that even if things are not going the way it should be, Lord Chaitanya is taking special care of the devotees who are attempting to preach. So not for our ego, but for the Lord's pleasure, we should be willing to take that responsibility and not feel unqualified. Okay. I think it's almost 1 now. Yes, Mataji?
Shyama Rupa Mataji.
Oh, in the disciple course, yeah.
Yeah. Like only after listening to her, I realized that even being Grihastha, we can still, improve so much. And we spoke about truthfulness. Like she came and she saw the way things are done in our house, and she was so truthful. She told me, what you're doing is wrong. This is not the way you should do it. And I think, like seeing her, there's some hope that even being a Grihastha, there's so much more that we can do, Prabhu. Like she's living a real, a very truth. I don't know, I'm so impressed by. She's got deities at home, and she's saying that they are always watching her, and her. I think she's someone like I can really look up to. Yeah.
That's very nice. You can take guidance from her. Good. Now they are very experienced senior devotees who have been in the movement for a long time, and they have done many years of very selfless service and sacrifice. Lots of sacrifice. So when we sacrifice, actually, then things make a difference. If we remain in the comfort zone, then we won't make much progress. We'll go along, but it won't make much progress. When you make that extra endeavor, that's what makes us dear to Guru and Krishna, dear to Lord Gauranga. And because you're sincere, Krishna will send the right person to help you at the right time. Just for being sincere, you'll get the help you need. So that's our request. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's order. Amar Agya Guru Hoy. Tare Desh. Jare Dekho Tare Kaho Krishna Upadesh. He's ordering us. We don't have to say I'm not qualified. That means we know more than Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya is saying Amar Agya, and we are saying I'm not qualified. Right? That is asatya. That's not truthful. So our sampradaya, especially Srila Prabhupada, has taken the mood of Lord Chaitanya that everyone should be a preacher to whatever extent we can. No one is disqualified. Universities, yes, schools, colleges, everywhere.
Can I read out some realizations I've written?
Sure. Yeah.
It's not to glorify what I've written, my own thoughts of me. It's just what I felt when you're a leader or when you're in the movement, you're doing little things and things don't go your way, or you face some challenges in life. How I didn't react to it when my Gurudev helped me in overcoming those obstacles, and it just prompted what I wrote here. Just a hurt gives rise to pain and frustration, stops me from giving my best to Srila Prabhupada's institution. When I forgive, my enthusiasm miraculously comes back. I realized I allow hurt to control me from my purpose sidetrack. I allow the past experiences to determine my future. By playing the victim, from my responsibilities I deter. I realized I use my resentment to justify how I am not as Krishna conscious as I should be thereby. Yet deep down, I know at time of death why these arguments Yamdutas are not going to buy. If I say to them, I am not Krishna conscious because I am hurt and mistreated, Yamdutas will reply, tough luck dude, come along in your next body you created. Our Shastras are full of forgiveness, stories of forgiveness. Narad Muni, Prahlad Maharaj and Krishna made it their first business. Shastras implore us to forgive and forget our sufferings as token reaction of our karma accept. Despite the cleansing it can do to my heart, forgiveness is a challenge I do not wish to take part. I often find myself thinking, I am so deeply hurt. I don't know how I can forgive. My mind reasserts. I can't forgive ultimately means I'm choosing not to forgive. Full of suffering and resentment is a life I opt to live. A little self-centered attitude can be a good motivation to relieve my suffering and propel my devotion. So even if I don't really want to forgive others, just do it for my own sake, even if it bothers. But watch out for the false ego. It says, continue to fight. Stay offended and hurt since ego wants to be right. Isn't remaining resentful a weed in the heart? Since it keeps me bitter and tears Bhakti Lata apart. So there's no point holding up to those negative feelings. The moment I let go, it feels uplifting and liberating. It frees my heart from anger and resentment, preserving loving relationships, providing contentment. Forgiveness is good for my soul and my health. It definitely is difficult, but a great personal wealth. Please don't wait long, as benefits definitely outweigh the risk. Forgiveness is the shortcut to a big fix.
Inspired by Paramatma. Yes, it's not ordinary. Very nice. Oh, no.
What you think and how it should be.
I wish I could get a fraction of that realization. I would be very happy. Yes, something. This gives us faith, isn't it? That the Lord is there and He is willing to reciprocate with us. He is there for us. Very nice. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Radha Gopinath ki jai. Hare Krishna. We should